at a jewelry store in a small mall somewhere remote in Canada. It's a fun job. I love my co-workers, the customers, and the fixed schedule working in a mall gives me. It's nice to know I'll be off by 6 p.m. every night, giving me plenty of time to socialize and study outside of work. The mall is a single loop with probably about 50 stores operating on average. The employer staff consists of about 30 people to keep them all operating. Half of this stuff works admin and the other 15 or so work security. As a regular 40-hour-a-week employee, I've had my fair share of interactions with security, having them escort me to the bus stop on occasional nights or calling them into the store to help deal with irate customers. Over the years, I became good acquaintances with a few of the security guards. My favorites were Will, April, and Mark. Will was the friendliest. He'd pop his head into my store and say good morning when I was opening. April was the most by-the-book security guard. She usually helped me deal with difficult customers. Mark was one of the evening security guards, so my only interactions with him were escorts late at night to the bus, during which he was quiet but polite. A schedule shuffle last year put Will on parking lot patrols, April mostly on the evening shift, and Mark on day duty. Not the end of the world, just a change. I no longer had a friendly conversation with Will as I opened the store, and not having badass April around to step in when customers got unruly. Mark was a lot more quiet than his two counterparts, and just wasn't quite as friendly. I didn't interact with him much for the first few months after this new schedule started. I'd smile at him as he walked by my store and had him help out a few times with shoplifters, but beyond that, nada. No great friendship blossoming out of the schedule rotation or anything. About 2 months after the schedule had changed, I had my first bad encounter with Mark. I was walking through one of the mall staff hallways to take a washroom break. Happened to be walking just ahead of me, also going to the washroom. When we reached the doors, he looked me up and down and then remarked, "This is going to be hard." I got a bit of a chill when he said that, but assumed there was an issue in the men's washroom. Someone passed out in a stall or something. So I asked him, "Oh no, why?" Because I'm nosy and was excited to have a bit of mall gossip to share with my coworkers. He got a cold, distant look in his eyes and said, "My doctor advised against heavy lifting," and then winked at me. I ran into the girls' washroom and texted my manager, freaking out about what he had said, knowing full well what he implied with that remark. Mark is a 45-year-old man with graying hair and a bit of a beer gut. He stands at about 6 feet 2 inches. I am a tiny 5 feet 7 inches girl who was about 20 at the time of this incident. It creeped me out so much that I reported it to April on my next shift, who promised me she would handle it. I stopped seeing Mark doing patrols and assumed he had been switched back off of the day shift. For about 2 weeks, I heard nothing from him or any of the other security guards. I was just about to end my shift one evening with about 15 minutes left before we closed for the day. I hear someone enter my store and look up to see Mark walking toward me with just a look of pure hate on his face. I wasn't working alone, so I stepped into the back room to avoid dealing with him. It didn't work. The door to my back room opened, and he stood there, screaming his lungs out at me. How it was my fault he'd lost his job, how I'd ruined his life, and how I was going to pay for my mistake. He viewed the sexual comment he made to me as a joke and thought I was a bit straight from hell for reporting him. He screamed for a few minutes, and the second he paused for a breath, I calmly told him to get out of my store because I was calling the cops and security. He ran out of the store, and a moment later, Will sprinted in. He just screamed at me, "Where did he go?" And I pointed as I started to cry. I was shaking from the confrontation as I gave my statement to the police and the mall security. Mark had been fired after my report, But security was adamant that it wasn't my fault. Mark had racked up a bunch of complaints over the years, and it was just the straw that broke the camel's back. He was banned from all premises the day he got fired and criminally trespassed when he came in to scream at me. Authorities issued a warrant for him, and it took weeks for him to reappear and be arrested. During those weeks, I was very scared. Mark knew what bus I took. Mark knew my work schedule, and Mark hated me. Every time I turned a corner, I was scared he'd be there. This happened to me when I was 19, which would have been in 2003. I was born and raised in a small town and was pretty sheltered throughout my childhood and teenage years. I was always warned about stranger danger, but had never really been in a bad situation before. That is, until this happened. After high school, my best friend Jennifer moved to Los Angeles to attend UC. I would say that at this point in my life, I had never even been to a truly large city before. So when I went to visit her, it was a bit of a culture shock for me, especially things like the subway, bus, and train systems. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they were going with no help from anyone, and it was overwhelming to me. Luckily, I made it to a dorm okay from the airport. I stayed for a week or so, and we had a great visit. Jennifer and I were always together, which made navigating public transit fairly easy and comfortable. However, on the day I was to head back to the airport, she had to work. I didn't want her to worry, and I felt fairly comfortable after riding the bus and subway throughout the week. I said my goodbyes and managed to get on the train to the airport. The first stretch of my trip to the airport went fine. I think I had even printed off directions. In case you've never used the LA train system, it travels through a lot of smaller neighborhoods before it hits more recognizable, typical this way to airport signs. At some point, I became convinced that I was going the wrong way, that I had no idea where I was, that I was going to miss my plane, panicking basically. I got off at the next stop and found the map of transit lines, studying them like they were written in Greek. That's when he came up to me. Now, when I think about what he looked like, it's a blur. He was big, that I remember, and had 100 pounds on me easily. But he was a security guard, and he was very friendly, asking me if I needed help. He seemed to genuinely want to help me, and so when he asked me if I wanted a ride to the airport, which was very close, he told me, I accepted, grateful to get where I was going. For me at the time, a security guard was as good as a cop. I know now that's not the case, but I implicitly trusted him because of his badge and uniform. The first odd feeling I had was the way he threw my suitcase into his trunk, just tossing it in and slamming the trunk. Then I got into his car. It was filthy, with cigarette butts and trash strewn throughout. I remember not knowing where to put my feet and had to put them on top of the piles of garbage. Still, he had a picture of a little kid dangling from his rearview mirror, and so I thought, okay, it's not a big deal. He's a good person. We start driving, and I have no idea where he's going, but of course, I wouldn't. However, after a while, it's clear that he is not going to the airport, or at least not the direct route. I try and stay calm and ask him questions. He asserts that he knows where he's going, that this is the fastest secret way, stuff like that. We ended up in a pretty abandoned business area, a place for freight and other businesses that were either closed or empty. There wasn't a soul in sight, just deserted stretches of road. He begins circling the same streets, retracing where he's already been. At this point, I'm freaking out, but I don't want him to know how scared I am. It's here that I feel like I wake up to the bad position I am in. He had these reflective sunglasses on and was smoking cigarette after cigarette. After a while of asking where we were and where we were going, he stopped talking altogether, refusing to answer me. After a long period of driving in silence, he started to ask me about my underwear, how long I had been wearing it, and what color it was. At first, I played along, trying to be cool, I guess. I made up the color they were, saying that my boyfriend wouldn't like the conversation and stuff like that. I tried to placate him, not wanting to make him angry. Then he told me he would give me $100 just to see my underwear and began to reach over and try to touch my knee and thigh. I just told him no, not interested, and he did not stop trying. At this point, I am fully aware of the danger I am in. The only thing I wanted was to be able to get out of the car. I began to think how bad it would hurt with how fast we were going. I began to tell him that if he just wanted to drop me off, I could have someone come get me. I remember trying to make him think that none of this was a big deal, that he could just leave me, and that I would be fine. I just wanted to leave the car. I kept trying to remind him that I had a plane to catch, and that I was worried I wouldn't make it, though I imagined that I sounded calm. I know that, in my fear, I was shakily saying everything. It's hard to remember how long we drove around in what felt like the middle of nowhere. I was leaning far into my side of the passenger seat, thinking that I would just have to jump out if it got bad enough. And then, after a final refusal to let him see, touch, or smell my underwear for money, he speeds up and leaves the area. He drives me to the closest train station quickly and pulls into the parking lot. Needless to say, I have never been so happy to see a train station. I quickly get out of his car and make sure people can see me. I can remember thinking that was important. He gets out, pulls my luggage out of his trunk, throws it out onto the ground, calls me A, and speeds off. I did get to the airport and make my flight. I didn't tell anyone this story for a long time because I felt so stupid that I had put myself into this now so obviously dangerous situation. I still feel this way, but now I worry that I should have told someone, that maybe he did this to someone else who didn't get so lucky. To give a little bit of backstory on my place of work, the building itself consists of a bunch of small one-floor corporate offices. There are probably about 9 or 10. Also, there are usually a fair amount of people here during the day. On one side, which is where my office is located, there is a small but thick wooded area where, if you go to the edge of it, you can see the residential street behind it. Now, in the day, it isn't creepy at all, but after about 7 o'clock, the creepiness increases because of the lack of activity and streetlights. It looks like a ghost town, except for about 6 cars, including mine. I guess this plays a big part in my fear, considering I am a 25-year-old, 5 feet 3 inches female working until 1 in the morning by herself. One seemingly normal day, I went outside to my car during my break to make my way to the nearest fast food place and realized I had forgotten my phone sitting on the charger under my desk. I made my way back inside, and while already inside, I noticed a truck pulling up on the far end of the security cameras we had displayed at the front of the building. I thought, that's weird. Who is coming to work at 9 p.m., but kind of brushed it off and retrieved my phone. I also stopped for a split second to use the bathroom and talk to my coworker a little. When I left, I looked around, noticed the car was gone, and figured maybe someone had just stopped by because they forgot to do something and left. I got my food, and about 20 minutes later, pulled back into the parking lot, but stayed further down from where my office was located because I still had time to kill. So, I noticed the truck parked in the far corner of the lot with no lights on, and again thought it was weird because earlier in the day, The truck was heading towards the area where I now sat. I saw his headlights flick on, and he started to drive toward me. I kept my head down on my phone while stealing glances to see where he was going. He pulled up next to me, being so close that if I wanted to get out, I would have to squeeze myself in between the cars. I began to panic and saw that he opened his car door, making the light turn on, allowing me to see him. I panicked and threw my car in reverse as he started to jog around to my side. I know I shouldn't judge, but this guy was huge. He was dressed in dark clothing, stood about 6 feet 3 inches or so, and looked like he could easily weigh 350 pounds. All I thought of was how easy it would be for him to knock me out and throw me into his even bigger truck without anyone noticing I was in there. He held his hand up as if to tell me to stop, but I was already hauling ass out of there. The last thing I wanted to do was talk to some strange man in a parking lot when it was almost 10 p.m. I looked in my rear view and saw that he was making his way back into his car. I freaked out even more at this point. I wasn't too familiar with the area, only the interstate that led into the offices from the highway. So I decided to hurry up and dip into the residential area, figuring that it would be easier to lose him if he were following me. I did so and kept checking if he followed me, which he didn't. I pulled out my phone after I stopped a couple of blocks away and called my mom to ask what I should do. She didn't answer, and my mind went back to the other female at my job who would be leaving in about 30 minutes. I called her and told her what happened. She told me she didn't see anyone, and I was probably overreacting because he didn't get a chance to talk and say what he wanted. She did say, however, that when I come back in, to call her, and she will walk me into the building since I was so scared. While I was on the phone with her, I took the street closest to our building and saw that he was still there, just on the other side of the parking lot waiting behind another car. I agreed, asked her to stay late with me tonight, and just sat there for about 15 minutes, trying to rationalize in my head that nothing happened yet, and I probably was overreacting. But I couldn't shake that gut feeling. Eventually, I made my way back, and he was gone, to my relief. When I went inside with her, she gave me this produced business card and said he had left it for me. She said he had banged on the door, but she was hesitant to open it because I had already called her and informed her about him. The doors have slam locks and cannot be opened from the outside without a pass. She said she opened it slightly, and he yanked it open from her, told her he was hired security because kids were breaking bottles in the parking lots while pulling out a business card, and that he saw a friend, indicating he saw me leave. She said she just took it and told him something along the lines of, "You said you saw her, and you should have a little more manners when dealing with females so late at night." He said he understood, and she waited for him to leave. I was kind of put at ease at this point, but that quickly faded into fear again. The same fear has only grown the more I think of it. Not one time did he see me enter my office or leave, and my car wasn't parked directly in the front. So how would he know which one I worked at? It also isn't easy to tell because from the outside, you can't see which office is open. All of the offices have lobby doors that remain closed with the light on for security camera purposes. Also, if he were a security guard, why would he leave within 15 minutes? I haven't seen him since this happened, and my schedule has not changed, so I'm pretty sure I would have run into him again. We informed my boss the next day, and he said he would call the owner of the property to verify that they had hired security. They did, but the company name was completely different from the one left on the business card the guy gave, and they were hired to come on the weekends. This happened in the middle of the week, so although I'm wondering who the hell was that, I'd rather not find out.